So before talking about the Greeks, we want to talk about two predecessor civilizations of the Greeks, the Minoans and the Mycenaeans. First, to look at the geography of Greece. Greece, as you can see, is a peninsula in the eastern Mediterranean. It's surrounded by the Mediterranean and the Aegean Sea, and it's also a very mountainous country. And those mountains and the islands tend to separate Greeks. So you'll rarely see Greece unified as one empire or kingdom. Now, the first people we'll talk about aren't actually Greeks, they're the Minoans. The Minoans are from this island to the south of Greece called Crete. The Minoan civilization was around from about 2700 BC to 1500 BC. And we don't know a lot about the Minoans because we can't read their writing, although we have plenty of examples of it. But we can guess a lot from archaeology. One thing we conclude is that the Minoans were probably some sort of goddess worshippers. Women seem to play a high role and a high status in their society, and most of their art shows women in very prominent roles. We also see very few weapons, so they seem not to have been a militant civilization, but instead one based on trade. Our best evidence of the Minoan civilization comes from an archaeological site called Knossos, which is a palace complex in Crete. And you can see a lot of the elements of architecture that you find in Knossos and the Minoans, the Greeks will borrow later. And we can see evidence of Minoan influence all over the Mediterranean, and they seem to have been almost an empire of trade, one that rather than using military force, they use their economic power. Now, around 1600 or so, the Minoans suddenly disappeared. There's a few guesses about what happened, but our best case guesses is that it was probably some sort of natural disaster. There's a lot of volcanic activity in the region that could have caused a huge cloud of smoke that would have wiped out a lot of the environment of the region, or it could have been a tsunami. And also we have at the same time an invasion of people from the northern peninsula of Greece that also may have attacked the Minoans. But in any case, around the decline of the Minoans, we have another civilization come down called the Mycenaeans. And the Mycenaean Greeks were really the first Greeks. They are an Indo-European people, and their language would eventually develop into the Greek language. Like other Indo-European people, they were a warrior people made of many small kingdoms and monarchies that kind of constantly fought each other. But we can see really the influence of the Minoans in their art. And we also have evidence of a war against a city-state across the Aegean called Troy. This is the famous Trojan War that was recorded in later Greek history and stories. Around 1100 or so, Mycenaean Greek civilization fell into a dark age. We call it a dark age because from about 1100 to 700, we see almost no written records where they had been using the Minoan language to write things. We see decline in farming, and we see the Mycenaeans move further south. It's just maybe they were driven out of their homeland by maybe another Indo-European people. And the Dark Age ended around 700 or so, and this time we see new innovations in Greek technology and culture. They replaced bronze, which they had been using, with iron, which suggests maybe they borrowed some of those techniques from other Indo-Europeans who came in. They also replaced the Minoan alphabet with the Phoenician alphabet. The Phoenicians were another trade empire from the eastern Mediterranean, and the Mycenaean Greeks adopted their alphabet and used it to write their own literature. And that language will eventually develop into Greek and then Latin letters that we use today. And we also have some of the first literature from ancient Greece. Famously, the poet Homer was supposed to have lived around this time, and he wrote made his most famous pieces of literature, the Iliad and the Odyssey, which follows the Trojan War and the aftermath of it.